Well, Prometheus, welcome back to episode 12 of the Simple Jargon Podcast. My name's Alistair. This is the crazy mascot dog and Peter. You mentioned that you had a couple of topics. You mentioned that you had a couple of topics that you wanted to talk about today. Thank God he's more prepared than I am. So let's just dive right into it.
Well, last week, we talked about, we were wondering how does it work with the election if, like the candidates like Vivek or Ron DeSantis kind of endorse Trump, does it mean they are still in a race? And I learned, yes, they are still in a race. They could still jump in at any time if they would like to. So that's a good news. That there is always backup in a case of they're not out of the election. So that's a good thing.
Awesome. Because that was, I know, something that we talked about as being kind of a big concern for us. It's
right.
We understood why Vivek was quote unquote dropping out and endorsing Trump. Hopefully it's a good move. I haven't heard anything more specific, although it doesn't seem like Trump is leaning towards him in particular for VP. I think there's other strategic options.
No, not yet. Not yet.
It's also too early.
I hear several different names circulated around, like, Kerry Lake, the Tim Scott, and a coffee spill. Do you need to do anything about that, or?
I got to master. I have a child. I have to master reverse psychology, and I haven't done it yet. So when I try and imply to Prometheus that he needs to back off for a little bit, he takes that as he needs to put his nose right in whatever I'm doing.
Oh, okay.
So
I think that no matter, I guess no matter what you do with Prometheus, he's one of those, type of dogs that no matter what you do, I think he has his own mind. So it's a kind of good lesson in humility. That's for sure. That's the same like with children. You think you can train them, and then you realize that they're just training you all the time.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Okay, so back to what we were talking about. Sorry for that interruption.
Yes, so on a positive note, Biden scored huge victory in South Carolina. So it's great, he's obviously still running somehow, and as he being pretty much unopposed, these headlines all over mainstream media, Biden scored huge victory in South Carolina as a nominee for the Democratic Party. You can't make it up. Yeah, it's just bizarre.
And something that we touched on last week that they keep running with it, both the Biden campaign and, to mention it again, Nikki Haley's campaign. It's just they are cherry picking and pie on my face. I couldn't remember what the aggregated poll name was, the name that they give the kind of aggregated scores, because there is a name for it, I believe. But the name that jumped to mind last week was the Quinnipiac one, which is not an aggregated list and is actually one of the very few polls that has come out saying that both Biden would beat Trump by like 6 points or 7 points or something ridiculous. And when they did the poll on if it wasn't Biden-Trump, it was Biden-Nikki Haley, their implication is that Nikki Haley would beat him by like a couple of points.
Right.
So they're saying Trump would lose by like 6 points to Biden, but Nikki Haley would win by a couple of points. So she must be the candidate of choice. And then, but when you look at the list of like all of the polls, it's like 3 out of 40 that are saying that. Anyway, it's frustrating, and I wish I'd articulated it better last week instead of saying Quinnipiac. I'm not going to edit that out. But because I'll own my mistake, but man, so Nikki Haley and now the Biden campaign, they're just running with it. They get 1 or 2 polls that go in their favor, and they'll ignore all of the rest of them and focus on that one statistic and pretend that they're doing really well. So that's my little rant, but can you explain just a little bit more? What do I know it's in some ways propaganda for them to say, oh, he won big in South Carolina, but what actually happened? Like, I haven't been following the primary there. I expected my brother to fill me in if anything important happened because he lives in South Carolina. But
I don't really have, like any big details about it. I don't think so. There are any big details because he suddenly come out of the basement, appears somewhere, and they make a big deal out of it, and they probably like he doesn't stumble, with his speeches, because I see those speeches every day, especially the Australia Sky News. They have so much fun with it. Every day they seem to be posting some of his, incoherent mumblings that makes you think, I wonder, because, if the Trump becomes a candidate, there usually are at least 3 presidential debates between the running people for Democratic and Republican Party. I really can see that this year the Democratic Party is going to refuse to have a debate, because there is no way that the Biden could debate anybody, really, especially Trump. I just cannot even imagine that would work for him to debate for a couple hours or something on a stage right at this point. So I'm just kind of curious.
Trying to check. I can't remember how many presidential debates there were in the 2020 presidential election.
Right.
So I'm just kind of quickly looking it up. It looks like there was 1, 2, 3, 4. There was 4.
4 debates then, okay. Mm-hmm.
There was 4 debates in 2020. First presidential debate planned. They canceled the second one. There was 2. So there was the first presidential debate in September. There was a vice presidential debate. So the vice president debated. Then the second presidential debate got canceled. And then they had a third one. They're calling it the third one, but it was just the second. So
I remember
2.
at least 2 because I watched them. But I know it was more than that, But can you even imagine him, try to debate anybody? There still must be something else going on. Like Megyn Kelly seemed to have somebody that she talked to that supposedly the Michelle Obama is the next candidate that's going to secure a nomination in a Democratic Party. So we will see if it's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't. But, I mean, the fun part about everything that's happening is that it's so farcical. It lends itself to like the most wild and ludicrous conspiracy theories actually seeming kind of legitimate. Like you can just say something like, "Oh, Nikki Haley's actually a Democratic plant," and you go, "Now wait a second. There's actually something to that." And I'm not saying that's the case.
Right.
Like, but it's just what's happening is so ridiculous that it's so hard to kind of know what's going on. And yes, I've heard all of these Michelle Obama things. You also hear the Gavin Newsom things. Like there's no shortage of other people that can shoe in. And in fact, it almost doesn't matter. I understand when people say Michelle Obama is going to come in. I understand the logic there. But I genuinely don't think it really has to be someone as important as Gavin. Sorry, I am going to blow their egos out of the water. I mean connected and with enough leverage. I don't really mean important, but you get what I'm saying. People like Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom who have all these connections and could really, really swing things and would be a powerful choice. Let's be honest. They're only going to end up being a choice if something happens to Biden, where they can kind of say Biden goes, "Oh, I'm taking a step back for my health," or whatever it is, for him to bow out last second and someone else to come in. In that situation, it doesn't, dude, I don't think it really matters who it is. Like anybody other than Biden, they would get all the Democratic voters back. Because there's so many people who don't want to vote for Biden, but it's not because they wouldn't vote for Democrats and not because they wouldn't vote for those policies. They just don't want to vote for Biden.
Mm-hmm.
And all they have to do is replace him, and they get all those voters back. Especially if Trump is the one on the other ticket. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like, so
yes.
I think there's some credence that you can put towards Michelle Obama, Gavin Newsom, any of these high profile people, but I genuinely don't think it needs to be that big of a thing. Like, I think the most important thing we need to watch out for is that, like, that moment where the Biden campaign kind of goes, we were totally intending to run, but oops.
Yes. I'm waiting for it every day, yes. Yeah. You know what, Alistair, what's more sad is, you know, we keep talking about those options and those candidates, but the deeper question is, really, look who we're talking about. We're talking about people that are corrupted, you know, people that we have some serious concerns about as a human beings and their, you know, their values. And, you know, I think the deeper question is, how do all these people end up being nominated for the highest positions? And I know I just keep thinking about it, you know, like lately a lot about how is it possible the type of candidates that end up running for these positions, not just for the presidential, but you're talking about the same thing for all the high government, you know, in the other branches of the government that are being elected. How do those people that are so obviously, I'm not saying not qualified, because they might be qualified by their education and stuff, but at their quality as a human beings, you know, and their value, and they being nominated to lead this nation. And it really bothers me lately more and more with that question, you know, how is it possible that how we end up here?
So, and I think, like, this isn't something that's new. I think there's lots of people who have done, like, even case studies and analysis of different professions and stuff to identify these kinds of traits. But I think it really comes down to, like, a psychological question and a behavioral thing, is that there are certain professions, I'm going to generalize and use the wrong terms, but terms that we would all like to throw at every politician, is that they're lying sociopaths. It's not the clinical definition of what we're talking about, but the idea of that kind of, like, personality trait that, like, does really well in politics, that they tend to have other personality traits that lend them to being a certain kind of person. And you see the same thing, and I'm going to say this knowing I know a lot of people in this profession, but another one that it comes up quite often is lawyers. There's certain, what I'm trying to get at is there's certain behavioral profiles that will lean towards particular professions. And it's a statistical thing. It's not like they're all getting together in a meeting somewhere and saying, hey, let's all be this particular profession. But it's because of those personality traits that are actually defective. Let's just admit it. Like, when you can be that callous and cold about the people that voted you in, there's something weird going on there. So anyway, that's what I'm getting at. There's two kinds of people that get into politics. And I think Jimmy Carter is one of those perfect examples. It's like, no matter how anti-Democrat you are, if you actually look at who Jimmy Carter was, how can you argue that guy was a malicious bad guy? He just wasn't. He was also one of the least effectual presidents we've ever had. Did you get what I'm saying? It's like he was a genuine, and until I'm proven wrong, I'll believe this till the day I die. He was just a genuinely good, caring, compassionate person. The kind of person that anyone, if you take a step back, would be like, do I want that kind of person to represent the president of the United States? In many ways, yes. But then that personality type just doesn't do well in politics because it's a leverages game. It's constant backstabbing. And I'm not saying that's what politics should be, but that is what it is. That's what American politics is and what it is in a lot of countries. And so certain personality types tend to go towards that. And those are personality types that we would really want in the people that represent and make decisions about us. And yet they put on a really good smile and get votes. Again, for the same for the same reason that they. Anyway, I'm belaboring the point, but that's like, so when you say those things, it's like it's really, really difficult to have hope in any politician, because you're like, any politicians that you see as a politician, you're like, well, they're a politician. It means they must not have a genuine interest. And my only rebuttal to that, to Jimmy Carter, is looking at places like El Salvador, and now with Milei down in, that's Argentina, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. With Milei down in Argentina, that, again, I hope these aren't people who got into those positions because they have ulterior motives, or they're just playing the politics game really freaking well.
Mm-hmm.
But in the back of my head, I'm always going to have that suspicion because they chose to go into politics. Do you know what I mean? So, right. Anyway.
I mean, I like how the Vivek several times mentioned that his reason getting into politics would be similar what we would have. And this is, we would run for the politics because we would like to have something better for our country, for the planet, but also for our children. And many times that's what he kept stressing, that he got really frustrated with how the things are, and he would really like to have a better future for his children. And I totally get it, because now, you being a father, you probably can relate to that you would really, like to have some better future for your child, which you're already planning for. Like, you already have your reservation about the medical care, and their approach to, for example, vaccination to children. You have some reservation about the school system that's forcing certain way of thinking on children. So you're already thinking about this thing, and of course, logical next step would be wow, I would love to change it. And Vivek seemed to be in a position that he had that opportunity because of his wealth to do that. But he's kind of unique that way. Ron DeSantis kind of strike me like a little bit similar to that, but I worry about him because they talk too much about, super PACs and stuff being behind him. So yeah. I don't know if it doesn't come as clear from him. But Vivek, I like that.
I liked DeSantis when he was just the governor, because he didn't seem like as much of a politician. But I also didn't watch his career prior to him during the COVID era as governor in Florida. Mm-hmm. His presidential campaign has done like nothing but the worst for me when it comes to Ron DeSantis. Like, his presidential campaign told me that guy 100% a politician. I'm not saying he's still not going to be one of the better politicians. I'm not saying I wouldn't agree with a lot of his policy choices and stuff like that. But he now does not seem genuine to me. He definitely seems like a politician. One that I would hope would, to the most part, make the decisions I want him to make. But that he's an ambulance chaser, as far as I'm concerned now. And
this is a great
just as
yes.
devil's advocate, yes, I see what you're saying about Vivek, but this is what my point is if Vivek isn't genuine, if it turns out that he's not, then that kind of personality type knows exactly what to say. Like, them saying something is very different. It's that kind of old thing, like actions speak like loud. Oh my Lord, I can't speak today. Actions speak louder than words, and it cannot be more understated an expression than for politicians. They say anything they can say to get elected, and then often do exactly the opposite. So I'm hopeful that that's not Vivek. I'm hopeful that he's not the typical politician, but I can't make that decision yet based on just what he says, because I can almost guarantee, if you look at early Ron DeSantis stuff more locally in Florida, he's probably not toting the GOP line as much as he was during his presidential campaign, because he was more genuine then. But then he got elected, and then there's that other old adage, power corrupts. absolute power corrupts absolutely. It, like, even if you're a good politician, but then you get put into that position. Good politician. Sorry, there isn't such a thing. Anyway, I'm ranting. But yeah.
Yes, that was very disappointing about Ron DeSantis and his presidential campaign. Yes, he suddenly, was very disappointing. At least to mention that part, that his performance, how he came across. Yeah, it was very disappointing and sad. Yes,
you can hopefully chalk it up to like campaign advisors and people making decisions, and hopefully that's all true, but it doesn't remove accountability. Like, that was his campaign. He endorsed anything that was done by it, the decisions that were made, and it did not make him look good. I think to like neocon voters in Florida, made him look great. He probably increased his voting base locally in Florida with overtly conservative neocon voters. But his public perception on a national stage, I think, was only hurt by his presidential campaign because he came off robotic and very like towing the party line political. It's just anyway.
Yeah, it didn't feel right. It kind of felt like a bad coffee with aftertaste. Like when you get a coffee and it's kind of a bitter aftertaste.
Right.
That's kind of how it felt. Yeah. But talking about those disappointments, I'm noticing more than ever in like the smaller outlets and the different independent podcasters start questioning some of those decisions that come up from the people in politics. And I don't see it, of course, in mainstream media, anything like that, except picking up on Trump. Or if anybody supports Trump, they find a way to pick on them for a while. It's always interesting. There's like a wave of suddenly about Ron DeSantis or Tim Scott or somebody that they suddenly choose. But the small outlets are more and more start questioning some of those behaviors. The latest one was, and I'm still cannot get it out of my mind how it bothers me. I guess there was a vote in House on a bill that would deport any illegal alien in the United States if they were caught in some internet fraud scheme or social media fraud scheme, and they try to get identities or rob senior citizens or other people through social media, to deport them immediately. Well, in that vote, 2/3 of the Democrats voted against that.
Sorry, let me just to clarify. So this would be that if people who are caught doing those things that are here illegally, but are not they're all. So this isn't covering like people who are going through the legal immigration process and then get caught being fraudsters or whatever. And we're talking about having their immigration status revoked and then being deported. You're talking about a law that would say these people who are already criminals because they're here illegally,
right?
Then break the law, and now we're gonna. Oh my God!
We don't waste any time. We deport them immediately.
Shouldn't that be the thing anyway? If they were here illegally,
but obviously it's not. They just voted on another bill, which they voted for. Most people was, again, if you are drunk driving accident and you illegally get, or you got caught, and I don't know if it's just be caught being drunk or cause, now I don't know if it was either one, or cause accident, you get deported immediately. They voted for that, but not for if you do the fraud on social media on people. And I don't get it.
If you eviscerate somebody with your vehicle, then you're out of here. But if you eviscerate someone's, like in a retiree's life savings,
right,
and they're left destitute, well, that's okay.
Yeah.
You guys can both live on government assistance then. That's a win-win for the politicians.
Yes.
Lord love a duck. Okay.
Yeah, there is some, I do question, why would any politician right-minded wants to that was voted in by American people would even question voting against something like that. It just doesn't make any sense. Who are those people that are willing to make vote? What motivates them to make a vote like that? You just cannot even fathom that.
Well, it's like it's the disconnection from reality, and a great example of it was recently. There's been some interviews with Gavin Newsom where there was like some Zoom meeting or something that was recorded anyway, where he is telling an anecdote about being in a Target shopping center, and while he was there, some shoplifter stole a bunch of stuff and then just walked right out the door. And the cashier that was supposed to be dealing with Gavin Newsom at the time apparently didn't recognize him yet, didn't know this was the governor. And he asks, why aren't you stopping them? And her response was, we can't because of the governor. and now he's all upset about it. Like, how dare you do that? I want to talk to your manager. This isn't right. You should be stopping him. Blah, 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 blah. Claiming that California for theft over $950 has the 10th most strictest laws on the books. Da 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 da. Like making all these ridiculous claims, but it's like anybody that's an outside observer would look at the decisions that Gavin Newsom has been making and the speeches that he's been making and all the stuff, the rhetoric that he's been spouting for the last 10 years in California. No one thinks you're not accountable, bud. Everyone thinks that cashier didn't say that because there isn't substance to the statement. Like, bravo to the cashier. I almost wish they recognized who he was before they said that, because they would be even braver, But it's just like, no, Gavin, you might not have been the one that made a decision saying Target should allow shoplifters to walk away. But you have been speaking the rhetoric, voting on the things, pushing the agendas, and making the political will known that that's the direction we're going. So there's a massive disconnect between what the population wants and what politicians are saying we should be pushing for. And that's why I think then that trickles down to kind of lower level government bureaucrats and everything like that who are voting for things that, like you said, could you ever imagine their constituents being okay with them voting for it? They're not thinking about their constituents. They're thinking about what the party line is. And it is to vote for those kinds of agendas. So, yeah, I kind of wanted to get your take on this whole Senate pursuit against TikTok. And we could talk about the kind of substance of that, a la Simple Jargon Podcast. But was there any specific topic that you wanted to finish up the topic, Trevor?
About TikTok?
Yeah. No, just in general, before I...
No, there's a few, like I still have, a minute on go, but if you would like to talk about TikTok, we can.
Well, yeah, I think it's a good opportunity for us to kind of focus in on what our intention of the podcast was, which is, again, to kind of look at some issues and then ask the more fundamental questions about capitalism, philosophy, objectivism, and like how do we see, what do we see as the right answer here? And I find it really, really kind of disheartening when you see the pursuits that are happening in the Senate right now with politicians that I've never really liked that much, but they certainly seem to be more on our team than not. Guys like Ted Cruz and can't remember the other gentleman's name off the top of my head.
Matt Gaetz?
No, because he's a representative in Congress. I'm talking about the Senate right now.
Oh,
there's another guy that is quite often on the forefront of like lots of other things, and I'm like, yeah, I love these clips from. Anyway, I'll put his picture up so that people can see who I'm talking about. But these are two politicians right now that they are dead set about trying to ban TikTok in North America, and they make all kinds of arguments. I don't know how much of this you've seen or how much you've been exposed to it, but arguments about its connection to ByteDance and that's connections to the CCP and how data is transferred and kind of what they make arguments about the kind of stuff that's being shown on TikTok in North America versus the Chinese version of TikTok in China, how educational is and There's all these arguments that they're trying to make, and I'm just sitting there thinking, you guys are supposed to be representing the conservative side, the pro-American side. the one where I'm an American, I get to make my own choices. What the hell are you doing? Why are you going to tell me what? And I kind of think we've already touched on this in a previous episode, but it's still persisting, and it really, really bugs me that people don't see how much that invades my rights as an American. So I just wanted to get your take on it before I have the opportunity to maybe rant about one of my Ayn Randian objectivist things. But when you hear about this kind of stuff, what's your reaction, and what do you think?
I think it becoming clear as we more and more we talk about some of those things, because it's not the first time, is that unless there is some kind of crime, they truly committing crime by, I don't know, maybe exploiting minor or children for sex, or they somehow use it for financial crime or something, or if they can prove somehow they committing crime against United States even, then unless there is something that there would be as a crime being committed, then it really should be up to people to decide if they want to use it or not. Because then, as we mentioned before, how do you decide, and who decides, what's to be allowed and what's right? Yeah, it's kind of very questionable, isn't it? It's sad.
It's concerning. And then they buddy that up. I think the same or very similar congressional or senatorial hearings that they're having, they then grill Zuckerberg about Facebook. And I saw one little clip about it that was basically showing, and this is horrific to think about. So I'm torn in many ways, but when it comes to the ethical, political question, the answer is obvious. But let me just set this up. They're pointing out that on Facebook, often minors are being taken advantage of because they're entering into chat conversations with people who are grooming them, convincing them to do things, and then they're either being sex trafficked, abused, all kinds of things. And it's horrific. But here are these American senators that are supposed to be representing the conservative side of things who are asking Facebook, how come you didn't read all these messages and then go intervene? And in my head, I'm like, well, yes, I want that to not have happened. And I want anyone who took advantage of a child to face whatever consequences. And if we can do something that actually stops it from happening before it happens, amazing. But that can't come at the cost of everyone's rights. It can't come at the cost of you being able to look at all my messages and analyze all the conversations that I'm having.
Right.
So that you know what I mean? Where's the accountability for the parent that's allowing that child to go on Facebook and not monitoring their messages? Sorry, kid, you don't have a right to just an infinite number of messages that your parents don't get to see.
Right.
You don't. I wish I thought I had that right as a child. And I certainly hid lots of stuff from you guys. But that just wasn't the case. You legally had the right to inspect my computer anytime you wanted. And if any court ever said that while I was living under your house that you guys didn't have that right, well, now we have a whole other issue brewing. I wouldn't be surprised if that exists now in some places where kids have somebody's lobbied for kids' rights or something. But anyway, I know I'm talking about a lot of gray areas there, but basically you have senators who are saying, and my fear is that this is just a leverage to say, oh, Facebook, you're unwilling or unable to do that. Don't worry. We'll just have the NSA do it. It's okay. That's where I'm seeing this go. You're setting all of this stuff up so that you can point out some potential flaw, which is not a flaw. It's a lack of accountability, and it's criminal activity. But we're not in Minority Report. We don't have the ability to predict or know when people are going to commit a crime ahead of time. You cannot curb that behavior before it happens in many ways, and that sucks. And I want to empower investigators to be able to figure out what happened. You know what I mean? All those kinds of things. But not to the point where they get to just say this small percentage of activity on Facebook is linked to this specific kind of criminal activity. Now, either Facebook, you read everybody's messages and report everything to higher authorities, or we're going to have a government agency do it. That's where that's going. That's so not American. Yes. Anyway, so that was those two things. It's they're trying to ban TikTok because because American content users put stuff that's trash on it more than they put educational stuff. That's that's one of the arguments, which actually isn't true. If you TikTok has so much educational stuff accessible by North Americans. It's just it also has all that trash that China doesn't allow on its home inbound version of it. But that's not China's fault. I'm fucking sound like I'm defending the Communist Party of China, and I'm not. I'm just like, what's on TikTok in North America is nobody's fault but North Americans or Western content creators, right?
Right.
Like I think what I used to, yes, I totally get it. You're absolutely right. It's more shows those questionable things that are happening really just shows our weaknesses as a humankind, and show kind of the level where we at, that they just get magnified by those social media, unfortunately. But it's not a reflection of social media, it's really a reflection of us as a people, who we are, and unfortunately where we are as a society. So yeah, it's just banning the TikTok will not solve our issues. It's like banning alcohol prohibition didn't solve people drinking, So unfortunately, my understanding is that as we have this artificial intelligence now, from some of the stuff that I watched the last few days, the abuse of social media is just going to escalate. And also the crime, stealing your identity and stuff like that, or your financial records. Like the latest thing that it's been happening right now is, I guess you can use the artificial intelligence to modify voice to sound like somebody else.
Yeah, like those.
So you could get a phone call from me. There could be somebody totally different, but you would think it's me because of the voice. And they could ask you for whatever, some private information that you would normally not give to somebody else. So I think that those things are advancing so quickly that and our human mind is still kind of, unfortunately, very basic. And so the people that are able to exploit that because of their skill and stuff, they just have a really open playing field, because our human nature is just doesn't keep up with the sophistication of the technology, if it makes sense what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I know. But I still look at it as like the opportunities. As quickly as someone's going to come up with exploits like that, someone else is going to come up with a genius solution to it. Like, we're just going to move away from either one, unencrypted voice communication, or we're going to get to something where our devices that we biometrically assign to ourselves have some kind of like tag on the audio encryption. So when the other phone reads, anyway, I'm rambling. There's solutions.
Yeah, but what I don't want, I didn't want to jump into social. I was hoping to more talk about like those humankind and your concerns about the government's trying to solve it by banning things. But that's probably not really a good solution. I don't go on a Facebook every day anymore. Sometimes I don't go for weeks or on a Facebook. And now, used to be on Facebook daily, but now not anymore. But when I go on Facebook, when I open it, I still, get these feeds about, some women posing for, they want it for dating, or some, sex solicitations, or remember when I tried to buy the computer, advertised on a Facebook thing, So Facebook's or moms getting constantly those messages from some Middle Eastern man that want to date her, or African man, So Facebook is like open playground for crazy stuff. And remember, and we are very conservative. We don't even look for we don't even look for stuff like that, or we try to avoid it. But I think there's many people get easily sucked into all sorts of strange stuff going on Facebook. I just was talking to a friend of mine in Czech Republic that a few days ago, she was telling me the story that she meet somebody guy on a Facebook. He was supposed to be from United States, and then he ended up going to Africa, and they were talking all big laugh and this, and he was working in Africa, and suddenly she gets that messages that he's in trouble and needs some money, if she could send him some money, and then he gave her some accounts to send it. And she found out it was not even because she has a friend that works like in banking or something, the codes that give her was not even for Africa,
Right.
So after going all this, she didn't send him any money because she's smart cookie. And then she finally somehow told him, about it. He's just a fraud. And of course, he suddenly was all the, cuss words, running at her and all that.
Yeah. Yep.
So she called him. But how many people get fooled in this crazy stuff? Or because of dating on Facebook or other media. So yes, it's a big concern, but you cannot be solving that by banning stuff. The only way to solve it is hopefully that people evolve and have better psyche, which unfortunately we don't. So we get pulled into this all the time.
Yeah. So we can wrap it up by you're summing it up exactly what the point earlier was, which is. It's this idea that they're trying to make these government rules and regulations, and they're pretending that it's for the betterment of and the protection of society and its citizens. But a la the Minority Report reference earlier, it's you can't. We don't morally we don't want to be trying to ban crime before it happens, because the crime's already illegal. Like what we're. Sorry, just give me a second. Because I have a reference that I want to make, and I'm just trying to figure out how to get it there. Ultimately, this comes down to a freedom of speech issue in the United States. And they are going to use all kinds of these moral arguments for why a specific platform needs to be banned, like TikTok, or why content on another platform like Facebook needs to be curated or heavily monitored or regulated or whatever. And their intention is to try and stop these kinds of crimes that we do understand happens, because their belief is that if you just stop the crime, then society is going to somehow be perfect. And for those of us who argue that there is a better social system out there, like capitalism, it's not a delusional argument that if we suddenly switch to capitalism, now all of the world's problems are gone. I know there's a lot of libertarians that think that. They think that if we can just get people to all be capitalists, all of the problems are gone. Look how efficient capitalism is. But it's no. You're still going to have murderers. You're still going to have liars and fraudsters and cheats and thieves. Those things are still going to exist. We're not trying to create a society where we can prevent that stuff from before it happens. We would love a society where that is as minimal as possible, where people are as mentally healthy as possible, so they're less likely to produce those things. We know statistically that in places that have better economic opportunities, you have less crime. There's there's something to all of that, but we can't just ban that kind of stuff. And when it comes down to a free speech issue, I like what Ian always said when it comes down to questions about racism and these hate speech laws and all that kind of stuff is, do I want racists around me? No, I don't. I grew up in South Carolina. Trust me, I met quite a few of them. But it doesn't mean that I want to amplify their voice or anything like that. But it also means I don't want to censor them, because they're going to have those beliefs regardless. And the only way I know that person has that belief if he's allowed to speak or she's allowed to speak. You want people to be able to express their thoughts and their concerns and their beliefs, because it's the only way that you know what they're thinking. We can't read their mind. We don't have Minority Report little things sitting in Fluid that know when people are about to commit a crime. People need to be able to speak so we know who the racists are and we can choose not to deal with them, and we know who the whatever your concerns are. That's kind of what I'm getting at, and largely what we would argue about when these politicians are trying to make arguments to ban TikTok or to curb something on Facebook or to invade our privacy in terms of our conversations and do those kinds of things. Crime's going to happen. And those of us out there that are conscientious and socially minded, we want to facilitate solving those crimes in every way that we can. But we don't want to do that at the cost of our fundamental rights. That's not a fair trade, because those crimes are going to happen anyway. And it's not fair that they happen and all our rights are violated. I want all of our rights to be honored, and now the police aren't wasting their time knocking down people's doors because of something they said on Facebook. Instead, they're investigating actual crimes. So that's what I'll leave it with. I hope everybody enjoyed this most recent episode of the Simple Jargon Podcast. Any final words, Peter?
No, just see you next time.
Sounds good. All right.